Picture this. A global icon stands alone in a dark Belgian hotel room at 3 a.m., gripping the edge of reality as the world tilts beneath him. The man who built an empire on elegance can't even stand. In just a few hours, 60,000 fans in Amsterdam will expect to see André Rieu walk on stage with that effortless smile. But right now, he can't even walk to the bathroom. What happens when the world's most joyful performer is pushed to the edge of collapse? What the world never saw was the storm behind the spotlight. The financial meltdown that nearly destroyed his orchestra, the body that betrayed him without warning, and the quiet love that kept everything from falling apart. This isn't just the story of a musician. This is the night the king of the waltz almost lost everything, and the truth about the man who made millions believe in magic. The night everything, July 2010, Belgium. André Rieu woke at 3 a.m. to a world that refused to stay still. The ceiling rotated slowly above him. The walls breathed in and out like living things. When he tried to sit up, his body pitched sideways, and he grabbed the sheets to keep from falling off a bed that felt like a boat in a storm. Vestibular neuritis, the doctors would call it. A virus had attacked the nerve that tells your brain which way is up. In simple terms, André Rieu had lost the ability to exist in space like a normal human being. The timing could not have been worse if someone had designed it as punishment. A concert for 60,000 people was scheduled in Amsterdam. The entire Australia tour was booked. England was waiting. Months of planning. Millions of euros already spent on venues, logistics, equipment, staff, all of it, depending on one man's ability to stand upright and draw a bow across strings. That man was now lying in darkness, afraid to close his eyes, because even that small movement sent the room spiraling. The cancellations came like dominoes falling. Amsterdam gone, Australia gone, England gone. Each announcement was not just a disappointment to fans who had waited months for tickets. It was a financial catastrophe of staggering proportions. You have to understand how André Rieu's empire worked to grasp what this meant. Unlike traditional symphony orchestras that receive government funding and institutional support, André built everything himself. Every euro came from ticket sales and DVD revenues. Every concert was a gamble worth millions. The stage productions alone were insane by any standard. Full-scale castle replicas, fireworks synchronized to music, elaborate sets shipped around the world on dozens of container trucks. One production, a replica of Schönbrunn Palace, cost 24 million euros to build and transport. To sustain this dream, André and his company had taken on massive debt. The kind of debt that makes accountants lose sleep. As long as the shows went on, the machine worked. The revenue came in, the debts got serviced, the salaries got paid, the next tour got funded. But now, the shows were not going on. Now the machine was hemorrhaging money, with nothing coming in to replace it. Venue rentals already paid became worthless. Marketing campaigns evaporated into nothing. Orchestra salaries still had to be paid because 120 people depended on this man's violin to feed their families. Conservative estimates put the company tens of millions of euros in debt during this period. Some sources whispered 30 to 40 million. Those numbers landed on a man who could not stand up without the world tilting sideways. In the Maastricht castle, that had once seemed like a fairy tale symbol of success, André faced questions that had no good answers. What if this was permanent? What if he could never tour again? What would happen to all those people who had built their lives around his music? The Waltz King, the man who made thousands spin in joyful circles across 5 continents, now lay in the dark, listening to his own heartbeat, and wondering if his career was over. The rehabilitation was brutal in its simplicity. Standing on one leg until the trembling stopped, tracking a finger with his eyes, while fighting the urge to vomit. Focusing on a single point on the wall, while his inner ear insisted the room was rotating. A letter arrived from a fan in Australia who had recovered from the same condition. It contained exercises that seemed almost stupidly basic, but André followed them religiously, 3 times a day, 30 minutes each session, treating each repetition like learning a new instrument. Slowly, over weeks and months, his body began to remember how to exist in space. The tours eventually resumed, the crowds returned. The world saw a triumphant comeback story. What the world did not see was the fear that never left. Doctors told him the condition had roughly a 5% chance of recurring. For a man whose entire existence depended on balance, 5% felt like a loaded gun pointed at his head every single night he walked on stage. And then Mexico City happened. This was 2024. André was past 75 years old, and he still could not slow down because the machine still needed feeding. 6 consecutive nights at an altitude of over 2,000 meters. Jet lag that would crush someone half his age. A vicious flu that he tried to power through, because powering through was the only mode he knew. After the second concert, his body issued its final ultimatum: high fever, shortness of breath, exhaustion so complete that he called his wife just to whisper that he never wanted to open another tour like this again. 4 shows canceled, over 40,000 tickets refunded, 125 people sent home mid-tour. His body was telling him, in terms that could no longer be ignored, that the old rules no longer applied. But this is not where the story begins. This is where it almost ended. To understand why André Rieu built an empire on happiness in the first place, you have to go back to the very beginning and meet a little boy in Maastricht who learned early that music could be both prison and escape. The boy who was never enough. André Rieu was born on October 1st, 1949, into a family where music was not a choice, but a sentence. His father conducted the Limburg Symphony Orchestra with the warmth of a glacier. His mother ran the household with mechanical efficiency designed to produce one thing: perfection. There was music everywhere in that house. There was love nowhere. André has said it plainly in interviews, without bitterness, without drama, just stating fact, like reading a weather report. His parents did not love him. Not the way children need to be loved. When young André picked up the violin, he felt 2 things at once. The instrument was his escape, the only place where he could exist without the weight of his parents' disappointment pressing down on him. But it was also terror, because the moment he played a wrong note, the room turned cold. His father's gaze could freeze a child's blood. Nobody asked André if music made him happy. Nobody cared about his happiness at all. The only thing that mattered was that every note landed perfectly. In that pressure cooker of discipline without warmth, André learned to suppress his own emotions. He learned to perform. But something else was growing inside him during those cold Maastricht evenings. While sitting in the empty rows behind his father's orchestra, watching musicians play beautiful waltzes to audiences who sat like statues, André began to dream of something different. Why did nobody dance? The waltz was written for movement, for joy, for the electric feeling of holding another person and spinning until the world blurred. But in the concert halls, it had become a museum piece. That question, why do they not dance, became the seed of everything that would follow. André was imagining a kind of music his childhood had never allowed. joy without conditions, happiness without the fear of punishment. By his 20s, André was doing everything the classical establishment expected: conservatory training, professional orchestra positions, impeccable technique. But the question kept burning inside him. In the 1,980 seconds, he did something the classical world considered almost blasphemous. He formed the Johann Strauss Orchestra with a mission that made serious musicians cringe. Make classical music fun again. They dressed beautifully. They smiled at audiences. André told jokes between pieces. The establishment reacted with horror. Critics accused him of cheapening art, of turning Beethoven into a circus act. Former colleagues kept their distance, afraid of being associated with this populist nonsense. One review suggested his violin was meant for art, not for amusing crowds. What none of them understood was that André was not trying to destroy classical music. He was trying to give it back the soul that concert halls had stolen from it. The success that came in the 1,990 seconds seemed to prove him right. DVDs sold by the millions. At one point in Australia, 8 of the top 10 best-selling DVDs in the entire country bore André Rieu's name. That is not a classical music achievement. That is pop superstar territory. Stadiums filled across 5 continents. The ancient squares of Maastricht transformed into open-air cathedrals, where tens of thousands swayed and wept and danced together. But André did not build this empire alone. There was someone standing beside him from the very beginning. Someone without whom none of this would exist. The woman behind the king. Her name was Marjorie, and she was everything André's childhood had lacked. She was a language teacher when they met. No background in performance, no interest in spotlights. She loved books and quiet rooms, and preferred existing behind curtains rather than in front of cameras. They met at a party hosted by André's sister, and something clicked that would last nearly half a century. André's parents doubted her immediately. Too free-spirited, they said, not disciplined enough for a family of serious musicians. But André saw what his cold, demanding parents could not. He saw brilliance. He saw organizational genius. Most importantly, he saw someone who understood the loneliness of a boy raised in emotional winter. Together, in the early days when success was still a fantasy, they built something from nothing. André performed in nursing homes and small festival halls, while Marjorie handled bookings, often while pregnant. She wrote the spoken interludes between musical pieces. She managed finances that would have overwhelmed professional accountants. She made the phone calls André dreaded. She was wife, manager, writer, shield, and secret weapon, all at once. For every moment André stood in the spotlight, Marjorie was in the shadows, making sure that spotlight stayed on. And when André's body broke in that Belgian hotel room in 2010, it was Marjorie who held everything together. She became 2 people during that crisis. By day, she sat in meetings with bankers and lawyers, fighting to keep the financial machinery from total collapse. By night, she propped pillows under her husband's head and watched him attempt the simple act of walking across a room. She made the hardest decision of their career together. Stop everything. Not to save the brand, but to save the man she loved. What nobody saw in the years that followed was what the fight was costing her. Marjorie had been running at full speed since the 1,970 seconds, solving problems, managing crises, protecting André from every storm. But she was not a machine. As André entered his 70s, Marjorie began stepping back. The long-haul flights destroyed her. The jet lag became unbearable. The stress that once fueled her now simply drained her. Since around 2017, she has gradually transferred responsibilities to their son Pierre and retreated from the front lines. Not because she stopped loving André, because her body could no longer keep pace with an empire that runs on speed and spectacle. She watches his performances now through live streams from their castle. She cares for their grandchildren. She waits for him to come home between tours. Their love did not end. It transformed into something quieter, more painful. For André, losing Marjorie's daily presence was like losing his right arm. For 50 years, she had been the voice telling him which battles to fight. Now he had to learn. At an age when most people have long since retired, how to exist without her beside him at every stop. The king. At 75, the internet, meanwhile, does what the internet always does to legends. It spreads rumors. Fake death announcements circulate for clicks. Articles with photos cropped to make him look exhausted go viral. His own son has had to record videos confirming his father is still alive. When you become an icon, you become a screen onto which strangers project their fears and fantasies. The only thing you can control is whether you let them reshape your heart. André does not fight the noise. Past 75, his famous curls carry more silver. His steps are not as light as they used to be. But when he walks onto Vrijthof Square in Maastricht, the cheers still rise as if it were the very first night. He still makes elderly couples weep with the Blue Danube. He still lifts children onto the stage. He still tells jokes that make serious musicians cringe and ordinary people laugh until they forget their troubles. The touring schedule is different now. Pierre, the son who once handled only logistics, has become his father's shield. He says no to marathon tours. He cuts impossible flight schedules. The shows concentrate mainly around Europe, with longer rest periods between performances. Backstage, alongside set lists and lighting charts, there are medical checklists. Drink water before performing. Limit encores. Keep doctors within reach. The audience sees only that he still stands there, still smiles, still plays for hours. They do not see the infrastructure keeping him upright. At home, André is simpler than his legend. He cooks. He walks his dog around the castle grounds. He sits in the garden and listens to the wind through trees. He practices violin every day. Not to impress anyone, but because it keeps his hands and heart from stiffening. When asked about retirement, his answer never changes. He will stop when no one wants to listen anymore. Until then, every performance is a thank you to the audience, to the orchestra, and perhaps to the little boy who once sat in the empty rows behind his father's orchestra and dared to imagine that serious music also had the right to make people smile. And so, as the spotlight fades and the final note dissolves into silence, we're left with a truth far more complicated than the music that carried him. André Rieu didn't just rewrite the rules of performance. He revealed the cost of carrying an entire world's joy on his shoulders. But this story doesn't end with applause, not even close. Because behind every triumphant return, every glittering stage, every flawless waltz, there are decisions, risks, and shadows the audience never sees. The question now is this: when a man builds a kingdom out of joy, what happens when the weight of that joy becomes too heavy to hold?